Hello. So today's topic is the principle of economic geography. The structure of unit will include introduction, aim, scope, sectors of the economy, primary sector, secondary sector, tertiary sector, public versus private sector, and how it is relevant to the economic geography. We will also learn about strengths of the private sector, arguments for the private and public sector, and then we will conclude this presentation. Now, economic geography is basically the study of man and his economic activities under varying set of conditions. Geographers are of different opinions as regarding this definition of this subject. In fact, different authorities have defined economic geography in a variety of ways, but their opinions converge at a common point of accord, where it means the study of the spatial distribution of man's economic activities in relation to its environment, be it physical or non physical environment. Now, these are the different definitions of economic geography taken from different literature. For example, Ernest Manin, in his book, The Geography of Economic Activity, has remarked economic geography may be defined as an inquiry into the production and according to Dudley Stamp, economic geography is basically it involves consideration of the geographical and other factors which influence the in man's productivity, but only in limited depths, so far as they are connected with production and trade. According to Dudley Stamp, it involves the consideration of geography and other factors which influence man's productivity, but only in limited depths, so far as they are connected with the production and trade. Then, according to Professor Zimmerman, the economic geography. Uh, Professor Zimmerman said that economic geography deals with the economic life of a man with relation to the environment. It also includes exchange and consumption of goods by people in different areas of the world. Particular emphasis is placed on the location of economic activity upon asking just why economic functions are situated where they are in this world. Now, according to J. McFarlane, economic geography is the study of influence exerted on the economic activity of man by his physical environment, and more specifically by the form and structure of the surface of the land and the climatic conditions which prevail upon it, and the spatial relations in which its different regions stand to one another. In the words of Hartshorne and Alexander, economic geography is the study of spatial variation on the Earth's surface of activities related to producing, exchanging, and consuming goods and services. Whenever possible, the goal is to develop generalizations and theories to account for these spatial variations. Surpassing all, Chisholm Messies is of the opinion that economic geography is presumed to form some reasonable estimate of the future course of commercial development as determined by the geographical factors. Now, what are the aims of economic geography? We may consider that the earth as the abode of man and its resources are his legacy. Being most dynamic, man is never satisfied with only living. He has always tried to refine his living conditions and environment. He is never satisfied with simple food nature has provided him. He has devised ways for preparing food. His shelters are not merely designed for simple protection, but should also be comfortable in every aspect and must match with the modern style. In fact, satisfies not only his physical needs but also his cultural needs. Now, what is the scope of economic geography? The basic question has been explained by several scholars in their own way and also has undergone changes with the change in nature of the study of economic geography. Until recently, it was concerned largely with spatial distribution of economic phenomena. The main sectors of the economy are primary sector, which includes extraction of raw materials, mining, fishing, agriculture. Secondary sector, which includes the manufacturing sector concerned in producing finished goods like uh, different goods which include manufacturing and then distribution. It includes the construction sector, manufacturing and utilities like electricity. Then comes the tertiary sector or the service sector concerned with offering intangible goods and services to consumers. It includes retail, tourism, banking, entertainment, and IT services. The fourth sector is quaternary sector, which includes the knowledge economy, education, research, and development. Then resources extraction, mining, farming, and fishing. The primary sector is sometimes known as the extraction sector, but it involves taking the raw materials. These can be renewable resources such as fish, fuel, and wind power, or it can be the use of non-renewable resources such as oil extraction, mining for coal. In 1920s, over 1 million people were employed in the UK coal industry. It was a key part of the economy. However, improved technology and the growth of other energy sources has seen a dramatic decline in this primary sector industry. The secondary sector makes and distributes finished goods, manufacturing, for example, producing cars from aluminum, construction, building homes and factories, utilities, providing goods like electricity, gas, and telephones to households. The manufacturing industry takes raw materials and combines them to produce a higher value added finished product. For example, raw sheep wool can be spun to form a better quality wool. This wool can then be threaded and knitted to produce a jumper that can be worn and can be sold at a very expensive price. Initially, the manufacturing industry was based on labor-intensive cottage industry, like hand spinning. However, the development of improved technology like spinning machines enabled the growth of larger factories. Benefiting from the economies of scale, they were able to reduce the cost of production and increase labor productivity. The higher the labor productivity, uh, it also enabled higher wages and more income to spend on goods and services. Then comes the service sector or the tertiary sector. This sector involves retail, financial services, insurance, investment, leisure and hospitality, communication, IT, transportation. The service sector is involved with the intangible aspect of offering services to consumers and business. It involves retail of manufactured goods. It also provides services such as insurance and banking. In the 20th century, the service has grown due to improved labor productivity and higher disposable income. More disposable income enables more spending on luxury service items like tourism and restaurants. Then comes the quaternary sector or the knowledge sector, which includes education, research, and development, public sector bodies. The quaternary sector is said to be the intellectual aspect of the economy. It includes education, training, development of technology, research, and development. It is the process which enables entrepreneurs to innovate better manufacturing processes and improve the quality of services offered in the economy. Without this growth of technology and information, economic development would be slow or non existent. It is also known as the knowledge economy. This is the component of the economy based on human capital IT, knowledge, education. It is primarily related to the service sector, but also is related to the high tech component of manufacturing. Now comes the private sector and its comparison with the public sector. The public sector is government, national, or local. Public sector jobs include doctors, policemen, teachers, and civil servants. The private sector is private enterprises such as retail, manufacturing, or local services. Manufacturing and local services. Public sector jobs as a share of total employment. And now I'm going to give some values. The public sector jobs in UK are 23.5% as reported in 2013. In USA, it is 14.6% as reported in 2008. In China, it is 32.8 as reported in 2003. And then it is 80% in Cuba as reported in 2010. In former Soviet bloc countries, state employment accounted for 70 to 90% of employment. In developing countries such as India and Bangladesh, employment rates are low, 4 to 5% due to a smaller share of tax revenue and limited government size. Which sector is best for job creation? Free market economists argue that the private sector is more suited to job creation because firms respond to consumer preferences and market trends and provide employment in areas of high demand. Now, what are the strengths of the private sector? The strengths include profit incentive. Private firms have a profit incentive to cut costs and develop products demanded by customers. In the government sector, this profit motive is often absent. Therefore, government bodies have a greater tendency to be overstaffed and inefficient. Bureaucracy. How is bureaucracy a strength for the private sector? For political reasons, it is sometimes more difficult to get rid of the surplus workers in the public sector than the private sector. Private businessmen don't have to worry about political popularity and so are more willing to make people redundant if it helps efficiency. The public sector, on the other hand, is more likely to employ surplus workers in unproductive jobs. Crowding out. If the public sector increases, then this is reducing resources for the private sector. For example, if we raise taxes to increase government spending, then this means the private sector has lower resources for private sector investment. Therefore, if government spending can be reduced, it will free up resources for more efficient private sector growth and job creation. Though there may be temporary problems from public sector spending cuts, in the long term, it will enable lower taxes and higher private sector investment. Now, the point is, the fourth point is that government spending that discourages productivity. Some government spending can discourage productivity. For example, welfare benefits can reduce the incentive to work and encourage economic inactivity. Now, I have presented some arguments for the public sector. The first argument is about public goods. The private sector is very unlikely to provide public goods because of the free rider problem. Therefore, the government needs to provide nearly all goods with the characteristics of public goods. This includes street cleaning, police, and the judicial system services. Then comes the point of merit goods and positive externalities. Goods with positive externalities will be underconsumed in a free market. For example, education and training could be provided in a free market, but generally there is underconsumption of the socially optimal level because private firms ignore positive externalities. Therefore, the government needs to intervene in public services such as health and education. By providing good quality training schemes, the government can help increase labor productivity, and provide for private firms with educated workers. The same argument applies to investment in infrastructure, for example, new train links and roads. Now, the point is about macroeconomic stability. Private sector jobs are more volatile with regard to the economic sector. In a recession, we can see a sharp fall in private sector employment as firms cut back on labor. In a recession, public sector jobs act as a stabilizer, limiting the rise in unemployment. J.M. Keynes argued that in a severe recession, the government should intervene and create more employment. For example, public works schemes such as the New Deal of the 1930s. The fourth point is no crowding out and liquidity trap. If the economy is at full employment and growing strongly, higher government borrowing and spending will cause crowding out. However, in a recession, there may be a sharp rise in consumer saving. This leads to a fall in spending and spare capacity. In this situation, an increase in government spending financed by government borrowing doesn't cause crowding out because the government is using private sector savings that would otherwise remain idle. Now, the conclusion of this entire topic is that both the public and the private sector have a role to play. For general businesses without externalities, the private sector is likely to be more efficient and better at is likely to be more efficient and better at job creation. Reducing the scope of government spending could create more private sector opportunities for investment and job creation. However, the private sector also needs a good public sector to provide education, healthcare, and infrastructure investment. Also, the private sector needs a stable macroeconomy, which the government has a role to provide. In a prolonged recession, the case for government intervention to create jobs is much stronger than when the economy is growing strongly. This was all about the economic geography presentation. I will come back with another topic which is even more interesting. Bye.